Dun dun dun. Dun dun dun. Since the first trailer was shown at 2017 San Diego Comic-Con, I was so excited to finally see that one of my favorite novels was gonna get a film adaptation. And trailer after trailer, the anticipation grew more and more, and so finally, opening night, I got to see what will become and is now considered to be one of my favorite movies of all time. At least top 5. Definitely top 5. Ready Player One was directed by Steven Spielberg and stars Ty Sheridan, Olivia Cooke, and Ben Mendelsohn. The film is an adaptation of Ernest Cline's novel also titled Ready Player One. After my first viewing of the film, I left the theater with this overwhelming feeling like I was just shot back in time. Back to a time when film and movies had a certain magic to them. And I asked myself why, or how did this movie do that? And it was more than the pop culture references that I grew up with. I mean, everybody loves the 80s. And it was more than the video game culture I am still, to this day, heavily involved in the community with. It was until after I viewed this movie the second time where I realized what it is or was about this movie that made such a great impact on me. First, let's observe the film and how different it is than the novel. This happens all the time with film adaptations, and it's because of this that moviegoers will always nitpick every single detail, and then they themselves will turn into judge, jury, and executioner. But does that make Ready Player One a bad movie? Absolutely not. In fact, I could probably say that this translates really well onto film. And just like the film Jurassic Park, which was also directed by Steven Spielberg, it was different than its source material, yet it still turned out to be a phenomenal blockbuster hit. The general story is still intact, where a man named James Halliday, the creator of the online utopia called the Oasis, dies and literally leaves the keys to his kingdom to whomever can complete 3 impossible challenges. And it's when the main protagonist, Wade Watts, is the first to solve the first challenge that the story becomes a race to whomever can get to the Easter egg first and inherit the Oasis. Now targeted by the main antagonist, Nolan Sorrento, and high-tech giant IOI, Wade Watts, and with the help of his friends, must not only help each other to the finish line, but also defend themselves as their lives are at stake, both in the game and in the real world. The casting and acting in this movie was nothing short of brilliant. Mark Rylance, who plays James Halliday, has this certain awkwardness and almost childlike demeanor that's very charming, and there's been like multiple scenes where I just wanted to get up and give him a big giant hug. Ben Mendelsohn, who plays Big Baddie Nolan Sorrento, does not disappoint either. For me, for the longest time, Gary Oldman used to be the best bad guy in the business. You know, anything from Area 51 to The Fifth Element to Dracula, he could do it all. You know, he was a perfect bad guy. But Ben Mendelsohn, ever since Rogue One and now Ready Player One, he's shown how good it is to be bad. So Mendelsohn and Rylance were the two that stood out for me most in this film. Not to say that the rest of the cast was garbage. It's far from it. They too portrayed their characters really well, and even more so when they worked together. Let's talk about the references in this film. They're everywhere. You know it's everywhere. That's what this whole film is about, really. It's references and Easter eggs. Matter of fact, before filming this review, I had this idea of pointing out every single reference that I noticed in the film. And it didn't take long until I realized that this idea was really stupid and really pointless and impossible unless I'm IGN. We see everything from the Iron Giant, Chucky, Street Fighter characters, as well as Overwatch characters. We see Batman and RoboCop and Freddy and Jason, and of course the beloved DeLorean. This is, of course, just to name a fraction of what the film delivers. So as I'm watching this film and fully experiencing it for what it is, I began to notice certain things. There's a specific scene where Parzival, which is Wade Watts' avatar in the Oasis, meets up with Artemis at the Distracted Globe. He then gives away his true identity, which is something that no one does or should ever do in any online community. It's then that the IOI crash the party, and both Parzival and Artemis's lives are at stake. Right at that moment, the scene becomes very familiar, and as Parzival takes out his Zemeckis cube, which is an artifact that turns back time 60 seconds, pretty cool, the score from my all-time favorite movie, Back to the Future, cues in. From the time that Parzival releases the cube to the point where both Parzival and Artemis escape, I was in a way reliving my favorite movie of all time through this sort of immersion, and it only made sense that it felt that way since Alan Silvestri was composing the score for the film. Side note, if you don't know who Alan Silvestri is, he composed the scores for some really well-known films, such films like Forrest Gump, The Avengers, Predator, and of course Back to the Future. And this wouldn't be the only time this film does this. As a matter of fact, since that scene, I had to be sure that not only was I keeping my eyes open, but my ears as well. So it happens again during the second act, and let me tell you about the second act here. This would be the second challenge of the contest, and I'm actually really glad that I had no idea this scene would be in the film, although if I had known, I probably wouldn't have watched this movie by myself. During the second challenge, our group of heroes, who would be named the High Five, would be brought to one of the most iconic and terrifying movie locations ever put on cinema, the Overlook Hotel from Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. And though this scenario is very different than the novel's original war game scenario, it places both fanfare as well as importance and meaning to the story. It's here that James Halliday hides the second key, as it was a reference to his most terrifying experience in his life. Not because he was terrified of the movie, but because it was then that he did not take a leap with love, a big experience in his life as well as his biggest regret. This whole scenario is one big giant reference, which includes memorable scenes such as the bloody elevator or the snowy hedge maze, and of course room 237. And it's there again that the tone is shifted with the music that accompanies the scenario, the familiar score that brought me back to the first time I watched this terrifyingly brilliant film for the first time when I was a kid. And it seems like that I found really important in this film. Not only because it provided fanfare or an even more detailed Easter egg for the viewer, but it provided the truest immersion one can only hope to feel while watching a movie or playing a video game. And in this case, it's both. This particular scene also provides what I'd like to call Spielbergs Egg. Let me explain. In the story, James Halliday creates this virtual universe, the Oasis, and it's a world created by pure imagination and influenced not only by his love for 80s pop culture, but through the experiences he believed most important in his life. This memory that Halliday hid the second key in was, if not most important to him, as it symbolized his biggest regret in life. As for Spielberg, The Shining was also important to him, but not because he had lost a battle in love, but quite the opposite actually. It was during the set of the original Shining that Steven Spielberg met the iconic director Stanley Kubrick. During that time, Kubrick had already made a name for himself in Hollywood with classics like 2001: A Space Odyssey and Spartacus, and so it only made sense that these two would eventually meet and form a bond. And it's because of these Easter eggs hidden in the Easter eggs hidden in the film that make it so exquisite. And it's really no surprise now that Steven Spielberg was the perfect director to helm this film. He is our nostalgia. He is our James Halliday. Alright, I know, it seems that I am completely kissing Steven Spielberg's ass in this review, but I did promise myself to point out some issues I had with this film, and there are a couple that I just couldn't ignore. The first issue I had with this film was how close off the real world felt in this film. The Oasis is meant to be a global phenomenon that everyone on the planet can visit. And though the scale of the Oasis does seem massive, in the real world, or the scenes with the real world, we're only stuck in Columbus, Ohio. And granted the story mentions it's the fastest growing city, I found it hard to believe that the High Five, as well as the IOI, were just minutes away from each other. And as for the IOI, I couldn't help but ask myself, where the hell is the police or the military in this godforsaken dystopia? The whole film, they're not in this, except for the finale. But considering their criminal reputation is so well known, as if they were the high-tech mafia, their reign of terror couldn't have gone unnoticed for so long. In fact, it was only until the end of the film that Sorrento gets apprehended by the police. About time! In the grand scale of it all, obviously I love this film. I thought the acting was great, I liked the story and its characters, but I want to know what you thought of this movie. Did you get that same feeling that I did leaving the theater? Whatever you felt, please comment in the section down below and let's start this conversation. In the meantime, I want to thank you so much for watching my review for this film. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, be sure to hit subscribe for more quality content. Thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Nick Masters, and I'll see you in the next video.